All right, so here's the general idea with these lines, if you haven't already figured it out. So I've got the cowling, or the, what is this? This is a fairing fitted in place, and I'm starting to locate the holes and drill them, as you can see with these clecos. And it's basically hold the fairing in place where you'd like it to be, and then you measure your line from the line over 5 11/16 and run your ruler right parallel with this line. So in this instance, if I were to basically put it like this, right on that black line, and I measure over from here 5 11/16, that leaves me a mark here. You use this line as a straight edge. Basically, you line up your ruler on that line and have it come up onto your cowling, and then you can mark your straight line and where you need to drill. And it works out good. I've got 4 of them in. I've got 2 here and 2 over there, and the clecos just drop right in place. So I'm going to continue to do that for all of it. I did these first. I want to basically work from the front, working aft from one side to the other. I don't want to do this whole side because it may push this side around, and I don't want that. So I just start from the front. I'll do 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and keep working my way back. So the first hole location for this more vertical piece of the fairing, that's all the way back here. You can see I've already got 2 clecos started. This one is in the starts back here. So now that I've got this one and this one, I'm going to go ahead and do this one next, and then I'll just kind of do them in order. I'll come down, put this one in, I'll come back up, put this one in, probably put this one in next. However they fall out, I just want to go right in order all the way down, front to back, and go left and right, and just work my way back. All right. I haven't done any trimming or anything. I'm just getting the holes located because I want to make sure I have plenty of edge distance, and I just want all of the fairing that I can work with. After I get the holes figured out, I can come back and trim it and reshape it or whatever I need to do. One thing, just like on the cowling, I had to do underneath the fairing on the back side. There were some rough areas. There were some areas where like epoxy had run, and there was like drips, and those were pretty thick. So I had to knock them down because they were in places that would have affected how the fairing lays on the aluminum. So on the back side, I just made sure that wherever the fairing mated with the aluminum pieces, that was flat and smooth. I got rid of drips and overlaps and things of that nature, and that made it fit a lot better. So keep in mind that kind of stuff when you're doing the initial fit. And like I said, my plan is to not trim anything until I get all the holes located. All right, I'm going to finish this up, and I'll talk to you guys here in a minute. Howdy, everyone. All right, you can see now that I've added the elevators, because now that I have the fairing drilled and fitted. So just as a quick recap, an arbitrary reference line, it doesn't matter where you put it, just so that it's parallel or somewhat parallel with the edge of the horizontal stabilizer. And then 90 degrees off of that, you draw your lines to the existing holes in the horizontal stabilizer, and then you measure that distance for each location. And I wrote the locations down just in case they happen to be different. If I didn't get this line perfectly parallel with the holes, these dimensions would be different. And then from that point, all I had done was put the fairing on, and I started at the front, fitted it as best I could, and held it there, and then measured this distance from the line along this line up onto the fairing, and then marked with a marker, just marked that. In this case, it would be what is that, 5 11/16. So from this line, along this line, 5 11/16, made a mark, took the cowling off, or the fairing off, drilled that hole, brought it back, put in a cleco, worked my way back to the next hole, measured from this mark, 5 11/16, come across 5 11/16 right along this line, made a mark, took the fairing off, drilled that hole, put the fairing back on, cleco, cleco, fit it as best I could, next mark, next measurement, next mark, next hole, same on the top, line, reference lines, dimensions, put the fairing on, fit it as best I could, measure down, mark, drill. And I did that working my way back on both sides. Now that that's done, I had to go ahead and fit the elevators because next up is to cut the access for the elevator tube to pass through the fairing. So this tube here, you need to make clearance for on the fairing. So now that I've got this clecoed in place, I can start to figure out how to cut that back. Actually, you have to start cutting it before you get the fairing fitted. Once the elevators are in place and that rod is there, obviously you can't get the fairing on until you start cutting that access. So that gets a little tricky because you don't know exactly where you need to start cutting. But it will make sense when you get it in place. You can kind of tell where you need to start moving material so you can get this back down and clecoed. So these are rough cut on both sides, this opening here. There are some drawings that show you, there aren't any dimensions, but they do show you like how to cut this, what shape they recommend. But I'm just trying to keep it as tight as I can to this rod through its entire motion of travel. It moves up and down in an arc. It doesn't pivot along that shaft, so you need a curved slot basically for that to pivot around. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that and get this kind of finalized. I'm also working on the bottom, these fairing strips along the bottom that get rubber. They say you can put rubber, that's what that is there. They say that you can put rubber along here, or if you have this fitted tight enough, you don't need to use the rubber. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, when I started to fit this, before I started to trim it, I already had a good sized gap of about 3 inches or so underneath here, a big enough gap without even trimming it. So I'm going to go ahead and trim down the rest of it so I can fit this rubber. But that comes later. But you kind of have to fit this bottom piece kind of alongside fitting the fiberglass because they interact with each other along with your cover plates. So that's where I am now. I'm going to finalize the cutout for the elevator on the fiberglass and then trim it to play nice with the bottom piece and to also play nice with the access covers. All right. I will talk to you guys later.